Welcome everyone, I'm the Depressed Dior, and this is Langrisser Mobile Apex Season 12. Alright, so for this battle there was a change to the box. I did finally drop Pyrotes and replaced her with Marielle. Marielle does have some guard bypassing capability. She can also be kind of made into a support healer type if you need to. The only bad part is until you actually switch her to her aggressive mode, she's pretty short-legged, though she can move 2 extra steps. One thing I've definitely noticed with this box setup is the more holy... the other reason I brought in Marielle was because she was holy, and which of course Lightbringer can buff. Which unfortunately the more holy characters I start adding in, the more emphasis my opponent has to ban Lightbringer. Also, since Lightbringer is my only tank, it's also another reason for some people to just ban her outright. Besides that, not much else to say at the moment. There's definitely going to be these matches will be a little on the short side, but there's going to be much to discuss as I'll be changing the box throughout this weekend's games. I did lose a match prior to this. I don't remember anything about it. I've been messing up quite a bit as far as a lot of dumb mistakes as far as failure is concerned, including one situation where I forgot to hit save after editing my box, and so I literally went into a match where my box had reverted back to an old build. I also would forget things like switching troops, for example. Like, you know, if I'm about to go up against like a tank that is Landius, who's cavalry usually, and sticking with sword infantry on my Iron Blood commander and things like that. So it's been a bit frustrating, just simply because they're not even matches worth showing because they're literally just me being dumb and forgetting things. Anyway, I banned Wedham first. Everything else here is not too bad. I haven't really talked about their box. I apologize. It has technically 4 tanks, I think. Yeah, 4 tanks. 3 of them could be any tank, and then SP Ultramolar can be a physical tank if necessary, though you usually don't need him to be. Speaking of, we haven't seen SP Ultramolar. I don't even think we saw him much, even back when he was actually being used in the previous seasons. I think those matches I either lost and didn't bother showing, or I banned him and therefore never really encountered him on video. Yulia we haven't seen in a while. Werner, surprisingly, we haven't. He kind of dropped off pretty quickly. We see Listel pretty much is kind of just garbage, unfortunately, now, because Rosenseal and Leona kind of shut her down pretty hard. And then it's just mostly just kind of it's mostly just a standard push box. It feels like the only assassins in here is technically Werner. Yeah, everyone else, the only other people that can bypass guard technically, I guess, is Werner, and Yulia can disable guard with her aura. In any case, one thing I will say besides them banning Lightbringer all the time is they would immediately follow up by banning my mass attacks, which that was the other reason I brought in Marielle, was to deal with mass attack. Give me a second. Sorry about that. It was closing Outlook. All right. But yeah, unfortunately, this box, people are figuring out what order to ban things in, and it ends up kind of forcing me down a certain path, which is a bit problematic. Anyway, they went ahead and took Rosenseal. I took my Rosenseal, of course. Went ahead and banned. I was kind of in two thoughts here. I think I was like, I have mostly mages. I probably should ban Christiane, and then I banned Hilda for some reason. That being said, Hilda is also a good pick to ban because she can completely negate crits, and Silvaria and most assassins tend to rely heavily on critting. I got rid of Sherry and went ahead and grabbed Lucretia. This ensures I have a mass attack available to me. They banned some more of my mages. They grabbed their Christiane. At this point I thought I'd made a mistake, but in hindsight it wasn't that big of a deal, to be honest. Banned their mages, I grabbed my Silvaria. At this point I was like, yeah, you know, I guess it's better just to use Silvaria. Ban my assassins. They take their Bozel. I'm completely fine with Bozel at this point, especially with a Rosenseal. Went and got rid of Listel and Yulia. Listel can be dangerous if she does get her unique debuffs off. And Bozel by himself can overwhelm the crystal barriers that Rosenseal can put up. So getting rid of her was probably the best call. Went ahead and grabbed Adankelmo just for some additional. I'm not really sure why I grabbed her, to be honest. I think I should have grabbed one of these other characters first and then grabbed Adankelmo if she was available. Because by herself, I mean, yeah, there's not really anything that actually she helps out with besides just putting portals in the middle. So yeah, to be honest, she wasn't the best pick. There's SP Altamuller, so I'll actually have to learn about him. And at this point, I did not want to deal with... I don't have a tank, so definitely getting rid of SP Elwyn was a good call. And I didn't really want to deal with Werner. I wasn't that concerned about my opponent having to act again. I can deal with both these characters, I felt like. And especially since they left me with my act again, so having my own act again can kind of counteract theirs. And Juggler can't do anything, especially with Frozen Seal in play. So yeah, grab my Liana, they grab their Liana. Alright. Christiane tends to go if you're going mage heavy, their opposing Christiane will either do two things. They'll either grab angels, which definitely are a pretty hard stop against any sort of magic damage, or they'll try to guess or try to counterpick your counterpick by taking Templar Knights. Templar Knights are not as magic tanky heavy, but they are not vulnerable to archers. Generally, the counter for angels for any sort of mage class is just to take whatever archer equivalent troops they have. In most cases, a lot of the top tier mages have access to firebrand snipers, which can also do fixed damage, though most tanks will be immune to fixed damage. Anyway, so yeah, nothing too special here. I did drop Reaper for mass attack because I don't really have... I do have my Empire faction buff, so I can buff 3 people here, so it's actually not too bad. The mass attack is really just for Adankelmo if we need it. Liana, of course, can also do Ode to Creation. So to be honest, I didn't really need mass attack, but this was just to cover my bases just in case. Sylvaria, I did bring her attack buff or her massive buff or whatever it is, but she's going to be kind of our primary attacker for this because we need to get around Christiane. Adankelmo, standard kit, nothing too special, and yeah, pretty standard stuff for Liana. Their Liana has sorceresses. I don't know why, so I don't really. Twilight Star will work on them. Disposal has sorceresses, so technically he could become immune to fixed damage from Twilight Star if he happens to have that accessory. He has faction buff, seal, and 3C, so kind of a standard setup there. His faction buff, I believe, works on Altamuller. I think Altamuller is dark faction, but I don't remember. Christiane here, angels, the rest is standard kit. This Liana, it confuses me because they have wizards as their troop. So there's kind of multiple tiers of certain troop types. Like for example, there's like Griffin Riders and Griffin Knights, for example. They're both functionally more or less the same, but one of them is just a tier higher and therefore has a much bigger stat lineup. Yeah, wizards are kind of like tier 2, I think, of the mage line. I think Thaumaturgus is the tier 3, and you can tell from the stats here, like 646 attack versus over 1,000. The only reason you would even consider grabbing one of these is if they had an ability that was worthwhile, but wizards, their ability involves attacking, which Liana shouldn't be doing. So I don't know if it was just a mispick or what, because honestly, like literally any holy troops would have been better. So yeah, it really confused me. In any case, Altamuller here. This is SP Altamuller. I don't... the way he works is his stats increase essentially every turn, and every time he gets in combat, I believe. He also ignores skill costs when equipping skills, so he can just go. He can go 2-3-2 if need be, or 3-2-2. Essentially, his stacking of his own his own buff is a lot more reliable compared to his base form. Besides that, he's able to move through units. And he has the ability to Let's see. Yeah, he becomes more mobile as he hits things. And a lot of his mechanics involve trying to get as many enemies around him as possible, because that'll do some things like give him extra actions. Usually the trick for him is he'll get in range, do Dragon Dance, which is a 2-ring AoE, hits everybody, draws them in, he gets an extra action, and then he immediately follows up with Supreme Battle to kill them. And if he kills them, this Supreme Battle immediately refreshes, so he can just keep going to town. The specific requirements for Dragon Dance is there has to be 3 or more enemies around him, and he has to have an SSR faction buff, which he can get from Bozil. For Supreme Battle, all it needs is 2 enemies within 1 ring of him, in which case he can act again. Now the thing about these act agains is he cannot move during these act agains, so he can only attack. So yeah, just keeping that in mind. Few things I kind of miscounted as we were going through, as I was doing this match is Bozil had boots, so he can actually move farther than I expected. That being said, the way Leona's positioned, she actually can't really support an act again very well. She would have to shuffle around Rosen Seal in order to get to maybe here with her act again, and then Bozil go 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I was under the assumption, for whatever reason, I was under the assumption he'd do something like go all the way to here and then go 1, 2, 3, 4, and then do his AoE. So I was playing this really, really defensive that I didn't need to. And Ultimate is kind of the same thing. He can go 5 and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, which would be dangerous, but for this guy, I actually caught on. I was like, okay, Leona can only go to here and then do act again to there. So ultimately we'll have to go to here and then go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then 2 rings would go all the way to here. So right now we're just out of range. This is assuming no Tenyo procs happen, of course, or Breeze. So used Adankelmo just to pass turns. I opted to not put up portals because there's no reason to at the moment. And it's better just to wait. Especially since I don't really have anyone that can actually capitalize using them. So I'm kind of spreading out just to kind of keep myself just out of range of any potential SP Ultimate shenanigans. There's the faction buff. So at this point, Leona can do a act again on Bozil. So Bozil can go to here and then go 1, 2, 3. Sorry, he can go all the way to here and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I moved Frozen Seal just out of the way just in case. The only concern I have is Alton Willer at this point, and so I'm just kind of waiting and seeing what my opponent does. Originally the plan was to see if they were to do an act again, but at this point, even if they did an act again, it wouldn't help them. So I was holding back on Leona all this time, but I have initiative, so it's not a big deal for me to just let the turn pass and then just do what I need to do next round. Alright, nothing too special here. So at this point I do go ahead and move into position. I think technically I'm in range. 3, 4, 5. No, I'm actually still just out of range. Even if Ultimate did get in range, one thing to note about Silvaria is while she's in Valkyra form, she cannot be displaced or teleported. So she would actually not count towards Ultimate's little mechanic. So she's actually reasonably safe, and Ultimate AoE doesn't actually do a lot. Alright, Retrogradation. So at this point, I didn't really need to do an act again because I'm going to be going first next round anyway. So I just went ahead and just kept my distance. Yeah, so he gets his little stack there. Yeah, I could have gone for anyone. I could have either gone for Christiane, Rosen Seal, or Bozil. Obviously, going for Bozil was kind of key here because it's one less DPS to deal with. So at this point, there's really only one DPS. I don't know what my opponent was thinking. I don't know if they gave up or what. So moving here put him just 1 tile out of range of Lucretia, which is super risky because I could have had that range extending staff. But even without it, as you can see, I can just swap positions with my Golem and then just move in. So yeah, move in. I have Archer troops against Flyer. and of course Impure Shockwave, which does tons of damage. None of the debuffs stuck because obviously Crystal Barrier, and I critted, which did more than like double his HP almost. So at this point, yeah, my opponent has 1 tank and 2 healers, and one of them with really, really bad troops. And so my opponent gives up. Alright, so I went on a little bit of a losing streak for numerous reasons. I was making further tweaks to the box, and then eventually I've been kind of mentioning this, that, you know, with Lightbringer you can actually kind of opt for a kind of a more standard box with Princess faction. And I was planning on probably considering that for when Girl in the Shell and New Zerda came out, but I eventually, with all the issues I've been kind of having with them just banning Lightbringer and then kind of being stuck with attack, you know, mass attack as my attack buff and having very little in the form of defensive buffs, I decided to go ahead and just pull the trigger and make a change. Also, I kind of wanted to get away from an assassin box. I've been doing assassin box for what, like 2-3 seasons now. So I wanted to see if tank push was possible. I did see a similar box on the Chinese server, which is where I kind of got the idea. They had Christiane. They had the standard 2-4 you know, tank healer box, and it was essentially a mixture of Princess and Holy. So you can just go Christiane and Lightbringer for your tanks and still have plenty of coverage. It wasn't a full-on female box like this one was. They had like Epsilon, and I think they had like 4 male characters in it, including SP and Matthew and things like that. But yeah, it's possible to kind of have this set up. Usually when you do usually your faction buffers are supposed to be your tanks, because they don't have much else to do usually. And so you'll have 2 tanks, and one of them would have their own faction. And essentially your opponent can do at that point is, in order to actually, you know, satisfy the need for those faction buffs, you have to kind of split your box between those factions, or find multiple characters that share those both factions. And so what your opponent can end up doing is they can ban one of your tanks and just force you down a certain path, and then just specifically target those that fall under the faction that actually gets the buff. Which is kind of what happened in some of my earlier boxes. I would have maybe like Christiane and Freya, but most of my box was Origin or something like that. And so most of my box was Princess, and so they would just ban the Princess faction buffer. And so I have to pick Freya, and then Freya could only buff like a fraction of the box, so it just ends up being not as good. Nowadays it's not as big of a deal because there are multiple ways of getting attack buffs at the very least. You generally want at least an attack buff, that way you can actually maximize your damage output. But if you want to do any sort of tank pushing or things like that, or a slower box in general, you kind of need defensive buffs as well, so you can actually tank anything that comes your way. Now you may be thinking, well, you know, if that's the case, can't you just mix the 2 factions and then just pick a bunch of characters that are both factions? So I did some quick searches on Langrisser, and the number, like, if I were to do something like Princess in Origin, there's like a total of 6 characters that are both factions. And then any of the other combinations, like Princess Empire, Princess Dark, Origin, Dark, etc., there's even less numbers. So there's not that many characters that actually share multiple factions, especially with my limitations, since I don't use male characters. So those factions. So I end up missing out on Mythical and Yelis. But with the requirement just being either Princess or Holy, I can kind of I can make a pretty flexible box. This box here has 13 Princess characters and 13 Holy characters. And then a number of them are both. I believe 11 of them are both. And then there's a few Empire. But yeah, so with this, no matter which one they ban, I can guarantee I can get buffs in most cases. And in the rare occasions where I want to take a certain character that doesn't have a buff due to whatever picks, I have multiple characters that can provide an attack buff. So yeah, that's what the box is. So yeah, I have 2 tanks. I have Christiane for Princess. I have Lightbringer for Holy. And then I have 4 healers. I brought back Sissy White, Sophia, Liana, and Rosenseal. So all of them can be... the only character that's not both is Liana, who's a mage and not a holy. But everyone else is princess. I brought back some characters I haven't used in a while, like Yulia, and characters I've never used, like Marielle, or Mariandel, and then Ashamir here. And for the most part, I don't really have much in the form of assassins anymore. Sherry does have access to a guard bypass, though it's not super reliable. And then I have Yulia, who could technically disable guard with her aura if allowed to get close. So yeah, that's kind of how the box is set up. I did do a version of this where I still had Ironblood and Silvaria, but I ended up kind of going muscle memory there and end up picking them over the other options, and it ends up actually hurting me. So I decided to just go ahead and cut cold turkey and get rid of both Ironblood and Silvaria, and so now I'll be trying this box out. Obviously, it's going to be tweaked as we go on. I'll be replacing one of these characters with a Ghost in the Shell, or not Ghost in the Shell, Girl in the Shell, and then New Zerda can actually buff herself, so I don't really need a faction buff for her. So yeah, a bunch of mixtures of AoE here. So a lot of this, one of the primary things I'll need to do is always ban Rosenseal, and then, if possible, try to ban any other healers to try to take full advantage of the fact I have access to AoE again. That being said, just in case my opponent does opt for characters that are very good at dealing with debuffs, I do have characters that are designed to dispel buffs as well, so there's that going for us. I did end up going with Rosalia for one of my picks, just simply to try to get some long legs and to take advantage of Adankelmo's teleports. And yeah, that's kind of the gist of it. So yeah, as for my opponent, it has 2 healers. Yeah, 2 healers, one of them being Florentia, which we haven't seen in a long time. And then only, looks like 3 tanks? Yeah, 3 tanks, one of them being Grenier. So props for this guy for picking SP Grenier, of all people. I'm assuming he's picked just for faction buff, but I don't know. Honestly, I don't. Maybe he's just a fan. In any case, the box is kind of a mixture of assassins and AoE, so nothing too out of the ordinary. Nothing too wacky as far as like mobility. There are some teleports, but not too much else. So yeah, I banned Rosenseal first. Oh, they also said it was 3 healers, not 2. So I banned Rosenseal. They banned my Christiane, leaving me with Lightbringer. I grab Epsilon. Of course, he's going to be annoying. At this point, I get rid of Jintoki and Sherry. Sherry can be buffed by Epsilon, of course. I went ahead and grab my Lightbringer. My opponent goes ahead and bans Sherry, and my Lucretia, they grab their Wedem. So already a lot of annoyances. Go ahead and get rid of both Kagura and I believe that's Kruger. I hate dealing with Kruger. I'd rather deal with Bozel over Kruger. Kruger's little global debuff thing that debuffs everyone around them is just super annoying, so I didn't want to deal with it. One other thing to note is with Shafaniel, even characters that ignore class disadvantage, like Epsilon here, those characters can still be stunned by Shafaniel's 3C if they happen to be demon class. And one of the other reasons why I opt to go ahead and ban Rosenseal is to ensure they have, unless they carry some sort of immunity on them, I can guarantee a stun on them, which can definitely be beneficial. So yeah, they banned some of my casters, nothing too out of the ordinary. They grabbed Hilda as a tank. At this point, they only have 2 healers, so I went ahead and banned both of them. Because now that ensures I can kind of whittle them down with Shafaniel. And I grabbed Shafaniel mainly just as a counter to Epsilon. They banned some more of my, I was going to say more of my holy characters, but majority of my box is holy. They banned my AoE and my portals, essentially. They grabbed Lucretia, which is a bit annoying, but not the end of the world. Lucretia is actually kind of dangerous because her 3C does have bonuses against holy. I went ahead and get rid of their teleport and their Bozel, leaving them with 2 tank options, and I grabbed Rosalia So at this point, they banned Sissy White, my Kagura, and left me with 2 healers. One of them being an Act Again, so I got that going for me. So I also got they got Lightbringer for their second tank, and I grabbed Leona as my second healer. So yeah, these changes I made to the box ended up also forcing me to go through those characters I haven't been using and actually updating their enchants. So I spent some time updating some of these characters' enchants to try to up their HP as much as possible. Unfortunately, I had some pretty bad luck with it and ended up just dumping a lot of gold and scrolls, unfortunately. Anyway, nothing much to point out here. It's a Hilda with War Goddess, so that's just bonuses against melee attacks. Wedham has werewolves, so he actually can't go over water very easily, so he actually has reduced mobility. Epsilon with giant zombies, nothing too new there. Lightbringer, standard kit with phalanxes. And then Lucretia did bring a black hole instead of the Reaper. Shafaniel, I went Sky Archers for mobility, and then brought her primary AoEs. I wasn't too concerned about removing buffs, so I went with Heaven's Sanction as the second AoE. Otherwise, I would bring the one that actually that's targeted and can actually dispel buffs. We got Leona here, standard kit. Lightbringer, I opted for Royal Protectors. My other option was Templar Knights. Royal Protectors do reduce magic damage. Besides that, they're not very good against anything as far as physical damage is concerned. They can also counter at 1 range, which is at least something, but I pretty much just have it to try to mitigate the amount of damage Lucretia can do. Also, having mixed troops also ensures Lightbringer takes reduced damage from magic, thanks to Tiamat armor. Rosalia, Griffin Knights, I opted to not take Chivalry, simply because I'm going to be buffed anyway, and I didn't need the extra mobility, so I brought Silver Spear for an extra attack. And then besides that, Rose and Seal didn't need to bring any sort of faction buff either, so I just brought a single target heal and just went off of that. So yeah, the big things, of course, they have no healers, so I can definitely gradually whittle them down. Lucretia might be able to passively heal, same for Lightbringer, but they're not exactly mobile. So the big issue right now is just going to be seeing what Wedham and Epsilon do. Epsilon being the biggest issue because he can bypass guard, and he just has a lot of extra range and mobility once he gets faction buffed. So I kind of have to play it by ear and see what happens. So I went ahead and moved up here. This actually puts me just out of range. I can go to here and go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So yeah, I'm just out of range. Shafaniel has a 30% chance of proccing her exclusive, which will expand her attack, her skill range and span by 1. So if that were the case, if that had procced, I would actually be in range right now. But I'm not, so Epsilon takes advantage of that and just moves up a step. Which is a bit annoying. So, went ahead and just provide some extra juicy targets. Epsilon unfortunately ignores class disadvantage, so even being holy doesn't really protect us against all that demon. So kind of just shuffling about right now. Yeah. And now everything is essentially double tanked at the moment. I'm not too concerned about Leona, to be honest. She's just there as an act again. If she dies, that's completely fine. Using her as essentially bait, potential bait, is pretty decent. Unfortunately, I had a bit of a snag here. Lightbringer passed turn in place and gave Tenyo Breeze to Epsilon, so his range is all the way up to here now. I definitely wanted to keep Shafaniel alive, because what's going to end up happening is Epsilon's going to kill somebody, he's going to get his stupid shield. So even with his stupid shield, I can at least stun him using Shafaniel and then try to finish him off with somebody else like Lightbringer. So my hand just fell back at the moment, which is unfortunate because now my freaking Glory of the Continent procced, but can't really take advantage of it. I do have an act again though if necessary. So yeah, nothing too special here, just Lucretia closing the distance. I went ahead and just pass turn with Lightbringer, giving her some stacks. And that's about it. Alright, faction buff, which will apply to Lucretia. At this point I went ahead and shuffled back just in case, so if Epsilon does go on the attack, I can force my opponent to move closer. I went ahead and opted for Miracle, which is actually a very good thing I did. You'll see in a second. But I went ahead and fell back Lorzen Seal just to keep her potentially out of danger for now, because I need at least one of the healers to stay alive. So at this point, Wedem did proc Breeze. I'm not too concerned about him. One of the things I did do early on was put up the crystal healing just to counteract his AoE. Even if his AoE, even if there's still someone with lower HP, I wasn't that concerned, because at that point he'll just be in attack range. One thing to note about his sword that he spawns, it is Demon class, and Shafiniel's 3C can annihilate it instantly. And anytime you get kills with Divine Judgment, you actually reduce the cooldown by 1. And if you hit 3 targets with it, you reduce it by 1 again. And then her talent also reduces cooldown. So if you hit 3 targets and kill one of them with her 3C, it actually refreshes immediately. Anyway, in this case, Epsilon has the opportunity to kill something. Obviously, the idea would be to have him go last and then kill something, and then at that point he has his shield up, and then you won't be able to kill him because of the shield, and then he just kills something else next round. Or falls back at that point. So his choices right now are he can target Lightbringer, which he will not be able to kill. Liana, which he definitely can kill, especially if he has Twilight Star. Rosalia, which I don't know if he can kill. So he ends up going for Rosalia here. Gets a crit and leaves me with 351 HP left. So a few things to note. The Miracle saved me, and one of the reasons why I was talking about the enchants earlier was because I do recall upping Rosalia's HP, and that also saved her. So that the combination of those two things is what kept her alive. And I feel my opponent's pain. I hate when you come just short of a kill, but it happens, and it was everything I hoped for. Also, I don't really know how his faction buff works. Increases the chance to critical hit and critical damage by 12%. Okay, got it. So it just makes it so you're easier to crit. Okay. At this point, I actually took a while to decide what I was going to do next. Obviously, I have access to an act again to try to do what I need to do. Obviously, I wouldn't give up initiative because I'm player 2. One of the thoughts I had was just to use Shafaniel and then just AoE and then stun him. With moving up and using the Glory of the Continent, I would actually also be able to hit Wedem and take out much of his troops. But doing that would guarantee that Rosalia would be not at 100% life, which means Wedem can easily do something like Shadow Step and just teleport right next to the entire group and then just kill whatever he wants. So instead of that, the other option is just to use Rosalia. The only concern I have about Rosalia is because I didn't have class advantage because of Epsilon's exclusive. I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to get kill or not, because giant zombies tend to be reasonably tanky. So like I said, I wasn't really too sure how well this was going to go. And I think her 3C is what? It's 1.6 times. So I ended up opting to go ahead and try to go for kill. Since Epsilon failed to get kill with Demonic Blade, the cooldown didn't get reduced, and since no other units have died yet, he's kind of stuck. He has no way of actually bypassing guard at the moment. So at this point I went ahead and just took my time, did Sword of Protection, to go ahead and get some additional stacks of Glorious Faith, which I believe that does buff damage. Yeah, increases damage dealt and reduces damage taken. And then at this point, I get another stack, max out my stacks. I debuff him so he can't actually counterattack. So he just gotta take it. And I definitely kill him. I kill him pretty hard. It wasn't actually, there was zero chance of it actually failing, it looked like. At this point, my opponent kind of gave up. And it kind of makes sense. At this point, I would be able to since I don't have to worry about being assassinated for the most part, I could just move in and start just doing AoEs over and over again with Shafaniel and eventually just win. The only threat would have been Lucretia, and if I could survive Lucretia's 3C. After that, the rest of it's not that big of a deal. So it is what it is. So yeah, 2 short matches. Obviously, this video has gone on long because I've been rambling about the new box. But yeah, that's what the box is right now. Like I said, we'll be tweaking it as new characters come out. I definitely want to try to stick with a more tank push setup. I did consider swapping to Heimdall over Thor, because Heimdall is kind of the defensive character. But right now, if you look at the stats here, I would only gain 16 extra defense, and actually my HP would actually drop. Also, Heimdall actually has reduced magic defense, so that's another reason why I probably shouldn't take him. There's definitely a number of characters that have taken Heimdall. In fact, I went up against one, and I actually came up short of kill using Savaria because of it. So it definitely makes a difference. It's definitely a way to try to counteract the physical assassins that have been, plaguing the meta nowadays. But at the same time, it will make you more vulnerable to magic. So it is kind of a trade-off. And you can kind of mitigate the reduced magic defense by just taking, what do you call it? Just taking any sort of magic damage reduction, armor, and or troops that can help with that. So for right now, I'm going to be sticking with Thor, but I may consider throwing some of my blue tokens Heimdall's way. Thor is completely capped out. Like, he has everything right now. Yeah, he's 79 out of 79. Heimdall is not that. Besides his number of his skills, I haven't actually devoted the blue tokens, the Morning Stars, to actually buff him. If I were to take all of these, defense would actually go up quite a bit. Yeah, it looks like it would go up by 36, which is, it's a number. You also get another 200 HP, which is also, at that point, I think he would actually surpass Thor's bonus. But besides that, though, also I don't think he has access to enchants yet. That is not what I was looking for. Oh, he does have access to enchants. So yeah, so you do have some options here too, but again, it requires so many of these, and I only get about 10, a little over 10 every week. So it's going to be a while before Heimdall catches up. So for right now, I'll just stick with Thor. Besides that, not much else to say. The only new things has been the additional battlefields, which have actually been pretty entertaining. Now that I have like so many different characters of different factions, it's been kind of, and having actual characters that can actually have flexibility for faction buffing. They're pretty fun. Some of them can be annoying, admittedly, but I did get to use characters I've never used. Like I did use, I used, was it Alpha? I think, yeah, the Crystal Tank character. I actually used her once, and she was actually really helpful with her physical damage reduction. Anyway, enough rambling for me. I am the Depressed Hero. This was Langrisser Mobile Apex Season 12, and I'll see you guys next time.